Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. I'm Kriti Gupta, Practice Director at Everest Group, and today I'm joined by Ronak Doshi, Partner at Everest Group. Together, we are here to cover segment signals and strategies, what is our BFS technology coverage and trends. But before we do a deeper dive into the technology coverage and trends, and given no conversation is complete without AI today, Ronak, I want to ask you, do you have a funny AI story to share with us today?
So, Kriti, everybody talks about AI taking over our jobs. There's one job which I want AI to take over, which was one of my activities that I used to do. So, we create a lot of proposals for projects and other pieces, and I was training a custom GPT to be able to take documents and then review it, right? And I wanted the comment, the output of the review should be crisp and should think the way I think, right? And I tried very hard to train the GPT to just focus on what are the errors in the proposal and what changes to be made. But the GPT kept acting nice, right? So GPT kept giving strong recommendations on what is positively better in the output, right? Which is, hey, this has been structured logically. You followed all the guidelines of proposal. These have been done in the good logical steps and so on and so forth. And I kept giving it prompts and instruction as I was training it, is like, do not give any positive messages. Only focus on the things that needs to be corrected. And I finally gave it up, and then I finally gave it a prompt saying no more than 3 bullet points of positive messages, and everything else has to be done. And then the GPT agreed, and it started working around it. So what I realized is, you always feel AI is not nice. It will take over our jobs, take over humanity, destroy everything, and all of those science fiction movie like. But for now, it was acting too nice for my taste. So I don't know if it can really take away the job of a reviewer who actually has to be strict in terms of looking at things and give the hard feedback. So that's my, I don't know, it's funny, but it's also a good AI story that I have these days.
Yeah, and good food for thought actually, which is, as you talk about it, AI not acting nice or AI acting nice, which is you trying to humanize the AI agent in itself, which is I think one of the biggest pieces of discussion today across the industry. How can we have both humans and digital agents coexisting and co-working together to drive meaningful benefits for enterprises? So thanks for sharing that with us, Ronak. Also, to our audience tuning in today, do drop in a chat letting us know where you are dialing in from. We have an exciting lineup of discussion items for you over the next 30-40 minutes. What we intend to cover today in the discussion today is, as the topic said, segment signals and strategies. We want to touch upon five key segments across banking and financial services space. And when I say we want to cover five key segments, so these five key segments are your core banking, lending, wealth management, private equity and alternate assets, and financial crime and compliance. What we will be doing over the next few minutes is we'll be talking about the key trends that are defining how these subsegments are shaping up over the next 12 to 18 months. At the same time, we also want to give you a sneak peek of what we have been up to in these last 12 months. So we'll be happy to share the research that we have undertaken, give you a perspective on the exciting things happening in the ecosystem of all the technology providers in the space and where this market is headed next. So I'll start with core banking. And I know, Ronak, you shared that funny AI story today, but anything specific you want to call out that you see in core banking and given any of the anecdotes, any experience with the enterprises today?
Yeah, no, again, happy to. So one of the things we are seeing from a core banking perspective right now is the need to drive modernization, with an intent that there's a lot more of capabilities from an AI, customer experience, right? Everything from pricing the products to kind of personalizing the experience to kind of driving faster time to market. There is this need that velocity is needed, and you're unhinged in terms of the velocity because of the existing core systems and their capability limitations. Plus, if you have to take advantage of the entire base in terms of if you think about AI from a cloud infrastructure perspective, right? Which is how is cloud shaping up, and take advantage of all the democratization that is coming out of that. So I think from that vantage point, definitely you need to modernize the core banking system, and that is where the conversation is around composability. That is where the conversation is around more modular environment, and how do we kind of move towards that engine as we are seeing it. But Kriti, I wanted to hear from you, right? You and the team have been really busy talking about core banking. I see a lot of these new technology product launches, so many blogs, so many published research notes. What are you seeing and hearing here?
Sure, Ronak. So, two key things that we are seeing that are redefining core banking is one is how do we have these intelligent execution layers, which is one big key question that is coming up in all the enterprise conversations. That, hey, I have been with my core banking provider for so many years, or hey, I'm exploring a core banking migration. But then, how do I embed intelligence into that execution layer? And at the same time, how do I operationalize AI? And given all of it, customer experience that used to be all about banking as a lifestyle has taken on a completely different meaning in today's dynamic. And with regards to that, our research is also answering these key questions from enterprises. So, if you look at our recently published reports, we came up with our leading 50 core banking technology providers that came out late last year. And we are doing a refresh of it in about 4 weeks, right? So, again, this is one key question coming in from enterprises. Hey, as I look at the core banking market, who are these core leading core providers? At the same time, I know you shared that story, but agentic AI is so big at the moment, even though enterprises are still exploring, but interest is definitely running high. So we had recently published this blog on banking on autonomous agents, where we covered these leading tech providers bringing these cutting edge use cases to life in the banking world. At the same time, we've also been keenly following how the ecosystem is announcing these latest product announcements. So, for instance, we saw a lot of pieces coming out about AI powered banking platforms. A lot of core banking providers also dabbling into AI, but at the same time looking into adjacencies in their core banking offerings, right? So, all these pieces we are definitely seeing and obviously experience. So, as we speak, my team and I are in the middle of the banking customer experience orchestration assessment, wherein we are looking at this dynamic of how experience is redefining core banking for the new age banks, the neo banks, and even the leading enterprises.
Yeah, no, this is so much exciting stuff out here, right? From customer experience to AI agents to core modernization as a whole. What I wanted to understand is who are these major technology providers across core banking segments, and how do you see the market here, Kriti?
Sure. And as we move ahead to the next slide, and I also want to let all of our listeners know these are snippets from our leading 50 research that we recently concluded. So we looked at the market from various lenses. So, for instance, we saw who are these leading providers across geographies. So, for instance, in North America, we saw the FIS, Finestra, Pfizer's. At the same time, we saw definite interest in the market on the likes of your TCS Banks, Oracle, and Jack Henry as well. EMEA, UKI, APAC, again, kind of a similar story. A lot of it is also pointing to the active deal activity that we are seeing. At the same time, credit unions was one other segment we saw in the specifically in the North American region, and some bit of the building societies in the UKI region as well. How do we see a lot of these 19 providers out of the 50 that we had on our research that are specifically catering to these credit unions? So again, the likes of your CSIs, Pfizer, Q2, Intellect, Mambu, all of them going deep, going niche, and then expanding their wings.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And Kriti, this is powerful, right? Because there's so much of regional contextualization that needs to happen, but then there is a global core banking capability play that we are seeing, and then there is a piece around how it kind of operates in different types of institutions, right? Challenger banks versus credit unions. So this is pretty exciting. So moving to the next one, right, Pratik, lending, right? This has been, I think, one of the early areas where you started tracking as an analyst, right? So I know you're very close to in terms of how this landscape is shaping up, right? From loan origination to loan servicing to customer experience to everything around data-backed insights and personalization. So wanted to get your sense on what are the emerging trends that we are seeing in the lending segment.
Sure, Ronak. So, I think given we just touched upon core banking, lending cannot be far behind, right? And like all the lines of businesses where separate cores, as we see, exist for a lot of these enterprises today, talks inevitably move towards how do I have modular platforms? How do I have these composable architectures which give me that full customer 360-degree view? So I don't have these separate cores that don't talk to each other, but at the same time, the architecture is so aligned and so interlinked to each other that all the data and process maps are visible. So that's one big key theme out there. How do I demystify the tech landscape? At the same time, again, agentic AI in lending, what are these low hanging fruits from a use case perspective? Can I have autonomous agents driving credit origination decision, doing a faster document processing, for instance, right? Helping in faster and reliable underwriting decisions. One other key thing that I am seeing emerge, and I think this was quite big when we started with our lending tracking of the market. Few years back, ESG data used to be the top of mind at times when alternate data used to get discussed in the lending space. But today we see this take another dimension altogether. So a lot of enterprises today are realizing they cannot rely, at least in the future where it is very AI first, they cannot be relying on these traditional data sets to underwrite risks, to underwrite these loans. So they need to be looking at alternative data. And I'm not just talking about ESG data, it's a lot of behavioral data, the kind of customer spend patterns, the kind of demographics they are in, where are they staying from a geography perspective. All of these pieces, again, very early days, but we are definitely seeing interest in the space. And with the promise that AI offers us today, I think the opportunities are endless, and we're definitely seeing an interest in this area. Anything interesting that you are also seeing, Ronak?
So I would say one thing definitely that kind of caught my mind from our research was the digitizing the lending life cycle playbook that you had, because what we are seeing from a lending modernization or lending transformation perspective is the conversation around we can't do these as end-to-end modernization because the market may has a lot of uncertainty, right? Be everything from how the interest rate environments is, how the demand environments is, the geopolitical issues, everything that kind of it is impacting the lending environment, right? Be it commercial real estate, be it mortgages, be it consumer spending and other pieces. So from buy now pay later to personal loans to auto loans to home loans, everything is having a lot of implications of this. And that is where the immediate priority is, let's take pieces of processes and put a lot more of automation and AI into that and drive significant efficiency and experience gains. And I think that is where the technology providers who are driving this change are the ones who are also seeing more momentum than the actual core systems in lending. So that so the surround systems in lending life cycle or the lending value chain is what I'm very excited about, and the market is shaping up really well. And we have started to see the private equity investors and others coming back into this segment, right? Who are kind of shying away from this corner of the fintech activity. So I'm happy to kind of see some of that activity come back as well. So Kriti, just wanted to understand from you, right? Who are these tech vendors? How are this shaping up?
Sure. And I think, Ronak, given you mentioned the process first view, we also need to understand within lending, there are different nuances across consumer lending, commercial lending, and mortgages. And across all the three, we have different elements of origination, servicing, collection. The digitizing the lending life cycle report, that research piece you mentioned, covers these processes even in much more depth. So within originations, we are going three levels down. Same thing for servicing and collections. But if I look at the leading providers in the space, and let me start with consumer lending first. So there are few players, in fact many of them, who do everything end to end, right from originations to servicing to collections. So you have the likes of your Finacle, you have the likes of your Intellect, your Mambus, and your new gens of the world, even Temenos, Q2 Cloud Lending, all of them having these offerings. There are some who have proven case studies and proven clients and proven successful deployments in specific areas. So let's say just centered to origination and consumer lending. So those are some of the logos that we are seeing on the top right. So again, the market is such, a lot of providers are specializing into a specific process area, into a certain lending product category, but we do see a lot of end-to-end providers also in the space. And if we move to the next slide, please, we'll see a similar kind of a view coming out across corporate lending. So this is kind of like the jigsaw puzzle piece, as we call it internally. And these modules just keep on moving around basis how we are seeing the market activity, how providers are also investing in their platforms basis the enterprise demand themes. So again, from a corporate lending perspective, the market is also quite similar. And lastly, mortgages, as you see, Again, this is an interesting segment in itself. We see certain providers, the likes of your Pfizer, Finestra, who are there along with their consumer offering at the same time mortgage lending. But it is also dominated by some of these specialist mortgage tech providers, likes of your ICE Mortgage. Even Blend has some of these pieces in this area. Someone like a Solifi, even Lend Foundry, that have these specific modules and offerings catering to mortgage lending. So again, all in all, lending is, I would say, kind of like a kaleidoscope of the different things and the different themes it is bringing together. Also, it helps within lending. There are multiple different types of products traditionally that have been sold. At the same time, you have a lot of product innovation happening in the kind of lending products that we are seeing in the market, primarily owing to the alternate data piece that I mentioned. Enterprises are being creative, and that is also percolating to the innovation for these tech providers.
So, Kriti, one observation that I have on the lending segment as a whole is if you look at more of the traditional products, those are the ones where enterprises have either built their internal technologies or also a lot of the business process service providers have built capabilities and technology platforms and providing the servicing around it, right? Be it origination, servicing, collections, the entire mix of it. So the market is kind of heading towards, as you said, right? Wherever there is more product innovation is where we are seeing more technology provider play. And they're also kind of moving, there are more new providers entering the landscape. That's why your kaleidoscope slides or the jigsaw puzzle slides, as we saw over the last few pages, were very critical because the market is shaping it in this way, right? So a mix of product innovation and how the traditional product ecosystem behaves is very different. So we're seeing that divergence play out here. So, and it'll be interesting, right? Because most enterprises do comment around having a bit of a sprawl of the overall lending technology environment. They have too much of technology for different point solutions and processes. And now with the advent of AI agents and other pieces, they may want to say, hey, can we replace some of these point solutions in narrow areas with much more specialized agents, or kind of build it on top of a more low code kind of an environment. So we're going to see a lot of shuffle in the lending environment. And again, as I started the conversation on lending, there's a lot of push on modernizing the workflow or the life cycle as a whole. So process technology is where the bulk of the spend is happening, be it document processing, as you said, right, or be it a lot of point pieces. And I think that's where the market is going to head. So it's going to be very interesting in terms of how things shapes up and how the large core banking providers and the core lending providers, how they shape up their portfolio offerings. So let's move to
That's true.
quickly then the third one, wealth management, right? I think this is one where we speak about everything from generational wealth transfer to new asset classes to innovation in customer experience to personalization to how do we tackle high net worth individuals versus ultra high net worth individuals versus mass affluents, right? This is one space which has seen the maximum number of new entrants from an enterprise perspective, right? The number of new wealth management firms, number of commercial banks, retail banks, and even pensions and retirement firms and insurance firms setting up their own wealth office or wealth playbooks. This has been one market which has been really hot, right? And this is an area where you have the Anthropics of the world to the Nvidias of the world and everybody else also wanting to take up share of the market by creating much more targeted solutions, right? This is the place where we saw the first generation of robo advisory kind of world to now talking about agent based advisory and everything else. So I'm I really want to understand, right? What are you seeing? Help us kind of clear through all this hype and all the fog that is there in terms of the wealth management innovation. What's real? What are we seeing out here?
Thanks for sharing that, Ronak. I think to understand wealth management as an industry, we need to also take two steps back and see how this industry has evolved. So, it started from these family offices that were very reputation driven, very intimate, one-to-one settings, right? And then we had this sudden era of digital experience boom, mass affluence coming up. Everyone wanted that slice of the pie, which is when you could do digital at scale. And then everything started moving to personalization at scale. Hey, how do I have kind of like these robo advisory pieces, as you mentioned? How do I take that size of the pie from the market? And all of this, as we see today, there was a fatigue. Few years back, there was a fatigue in this market. Hey, we are having these similar kind of robo advisors who are giving me similar set of solutions. I'm losing that human touch. And surprisingly, we are seeing this hybrid trust model coming back into wealth, wherein even the Gen Zs and the millennials of the world today are saying, hey, at one end, I do have a robo advisor, but I still need a bit of that human touch and human element, someone who can help plan and manage my wealth for me, right? And it's a very personal decision at times for folks. So having that human element is seeing a bit of a comeback, which is also driving how a lot of these wealth managers and enterprises are thinking about their tech estates. So as we look at the family offices moving to robo advisory and then back to kind of a hybrid trust model, the technology estates have also undergone a similar transformation. But today, as we stand, we are at a cusp of a very big innovation coming in wealth management. So AI is definitely one of the biggest disruptors. We are seeing heavy adoption for advisor productivity. How can AI help advisors have more touch points, manage more personalization, and have those targeted conversation? But the bigger piece in wealth that is seeing this transformation is how can I have transformation that is front to back? Gone are the days when I can just slap in a layer of a nice CRM on top of my front office and just have this conversation around, hey, I have a nice UI, I have a nice robo advisor talking to you. But today, the bigger question is my back office efficient? Is my middle office supporting all that front office is driving, all the leads that are coming in my way? Am I front to back fully transformed? And that led us to the piece, Ronak, around our research on a three-part series of how do you do this front to back modernization, which is where we did a supplier intelligence playbook, and we dissected the front, mid, back office by sub process, by value chain element, and for each of that process element, who are these technology providers. And the interesting thing was a lot of the incumbents, a lot of the end-to-end providers were there, but there was an influx of so many wealth techs. And at the same time, we saw a lot of the big tech providers, the likes of your traditional CRM providers coming in, trying to take a slice of this market. At the same time, hyperscalers were not far behind, trying to contextualize their offering to this space. So, all in all, very bullish about this market segment and seeing interesting activities here, definitely.
Oh, this is amazing. And again, I'm very excited about our systems of execution, research, and wealth management. This is, I would say, frontier research in terms of shaping the market landscape and point of view around what's the roadmap for CIOs to drive technology transformation. How do you take a human plus AI agent kind of model to drive process level transformation, and what does that look like, right? So, infusing agents into the systems of record, systems of engagement, systems of insight, and driving that systems of execution mindset. And again, really appreciate AWS providing one of the case studies for this paper as well. So really excited about how this is coming out, and also our customer experience focused research on asset and wealth management. So this is going to be, shaping up really well. And again, Kruti, this is powerful research coming from your desk. I wanted to understand who are the technology providers in this space. How do you see this landscape shape up?
Sure, Ronak, and happy to touch upon it. I know I mentioned we looked at specific elements of front office, dissected it by specific functions. So let's say, for instance, and this is a not exhaustive list, right? This is just a snippet of what is covered in our research. So if I look at something as a process as simple as an account opening, I am seeing varied kind of names, right? So I see players like Avaloq being here. I say Additive coming here, Essential, which is quite big in the Middle East region, also coming in. At the same time, I have someone like an ED Bancaire, which is Swiss based, very much entrenched in the geography, right? And I have players like your SSNC, Temenos, TCS banks, everyone doing it. But if I move to say something like client communication relationship management, that is where I see the Broadridge, like a company coming in. At the same time, someone like a fund path also doing it. So this is again kind of like the best of all worlds coming together. Again, if I take the example of say end-to-end wealth management, I think this is the name our audience, and many of you would be from these firms as well. You have seen yourself doing this end-to-end providers, but the major takeaway for us in this research as we undertook it, there is innovation happening at all fronts, and enterprises are looking to drive that innovation into specific process first view and looking for those process first outcomes. Because this is how the tech provider landscape is responding to enterprise needs. So this is, I think, a very good indication of where the market is heading and what enterprises need for us, Ronak.
This is exciting, right? So we've been talking a lot about how do we run very powerful financial services processes. We spoke about how do we drive change, growth, experience. Let's talk about manage the bank, right? So run the bank, change the bank, manage the bank, right? This is the topic where we are seeing bulk of the investments happening, right? From fraud to KYC AML to sanction screening to enforcements, due diligences, and so on and so forth, right? This is one segment where you see, huge private equity investment, but also investments from major tech providers, right? You already have on the slide out here, right? The Nvidias, the Finalgos of the world, kind of investing in this space, building new solutions, talking about AI and agentic AI. So fin crime, right? Financial crime and compliance overall is one of the hottest space, right? From FRAML to agentic AI to digital identity. There's so much, to unpack out here. So, Kriti, I think this is going to be a hard job, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
happy you are doing it and not me. So, go for it.
Thanks, Ronak. So I agree. I agree. I think fin crime space has seen a lot of, I would say, evolution in these past few years, specifically with the different kind of risks that banks and financial services enterprises have to ready themselves for. That in itself has started increasing. So you have different risk types and different risk domains that are coming in. So right from your crypto compliance to digital identity, themes like your trade finance based compliance, in addition to your traditional pieces around fraud, KYC, AML monitoring. Uh, I think the complexity of managing these is very big and very real. We are seeing enterprises also shifting from that prevention to kind of like a proactive kind of a mindset here. So how can they be proactive in detecting these risks early? How can they invest in bolstering their risk and compliance systems versus trying to set aside funds in the event of certain sanctions or certain other penalties or fines that come their way? So this is where again heavy tech investments coming in. And if we look at this space, traditionally banks have had separate risk teams, separate compliance teams, separate KYC systems, AML systems, fraud systems, risk systems, which were not talking to each other, which led to broken single customer 360-degree view, single view of how their banking corporate customers are behaving, how do they track different pieces, how do they do identity better, how do they do the KYC aspect better. And I think this is one space I would call the hottest in terms of the PEVC activity coming in, the kind of FCC tech providers exploding on the spectrum. The activity is huge, and AI. I think I cannot even cover this in the next for a few minutes as well. The kind of AI use cases we are seeing, right, Ronak? And I want to touch upon one of the research pieces we did, which is the Innovation Watch, the second piece on the recently published reports, wherein we looked at the generative AI applications in financial crime and compliance. And this is where we actually saw how advanced the market is. The activity from the tech providers covering use cases right from your looking at FRAML as a piece where you have integrated fraud and AML management, right from anomaly detection to fraud screening. The use case innovation is so huge. And this is not just on paper. You have enterprises actually adopting and investing in this, right? Which is what makes this space very, very exciting. What are you seeing, Ronak? I think any
Yeah.
interesting anecdotes from your conversations?
So as I was kind of looking at our inquiry data sets, and one of the things I wanted to, look at was, uh, how much of financial crime and compliance inquiries are we getting from our financial services customers? And almost one third of inquiries were around supplier decisions, right? Which was, hey, we want to look at technology providers we should consider for our fin crime compliance, risk management, broader kind of initiatives that they're running. So one thing that I do see in the market right now is there's a modernization of the financial crime and compliance process, data, and technology at the same time, which is also obviously creating a lot of implications on the talent model as a whole, because you're basically telling a lot of people who are doing suspicious activity report filing to saying, hey, now you could use AI to generate pieces of it, and your job is to validate it, right? Oh, you had to do search through several data sets and you had to run through multiple data sets to find the information. Now you have agents who will search things for you. So the way the financial crime process is happening is changing, and a large portion of this is because of technology providers and how they are driving this, right? So you mentioned trade finance, you mentioned digital identity, you mentioned transaction monitoring, or even the new age crypto assets and all of those, we are seeing a lot of inquiries coming in around who are the suppliers, who are the alternates that we could look at. So clients are very open to driving modernization in this initiative, and I think this is just getting started. This is gonna grow multi-folds in terms of the activity because some of the AI capabilities that are getting built is also early days, and that's the reason why you see somebody like an Nvidia launching new products specifically in financial crime and compliance space, doing things like graph neural network and advancing those technologies, right? Clustering mechanisms and all of those things. So the data and AI initiatives in this space, I would say we're just barely scratching the surface. There's going to be a lot more, and this is a massive cost saving, fraud and abuse savings, and also brand protection that banks and capital markets and insurance firms need to do. So this is going to see consistent investment because the ROI is very clear on this technology. So talking about that, Kriti, again, back to you. Who are these technology providers? How are you segmenting them?
Happy to share that, Ronak. So this is again for our listeners today. This is a snapshot again, an excerpt from our leading 50 financial crime and compliance technology providers research that came out a couple of months back. In fact, last quarter. And happy to share with the group. We are doing a refresh of this, so expect to hear back from us pretty soon. We are coming up with a 2026 version of this. But as we look at the market, and again, Ronak, financial crime and compliance, looking at the varied type of segments that exist, right? From your digital identity to payment screening to how you do AI/ML compliance better, how you have transaction monitoring systems. We are again seeing a mix of providers specializing and doing end-to-end things. So, for instance, in digital identity solutions, this was again one of our key pieces of research that came out in early part of the year. So we had providers like your Fenergo, Actimize, LexisNexis, Lucinity, and others coming in. At the same time, we had someone like on the transaction monitoring side, say someone like a Fenergo, even Contexa for that matter, LexisNexis, Actimize, again, Napier, Symphony AI. I think the market is quite big and moving in that direction. And if I just touch upon briefly on AI/ML compliance, you had WorkFusion. Obviously, WorkFusion was then transaction monitoring and payment screening pieces, but we had someone like a Comply Advantage also here, so someone like a Resolute doing quite innovative things in the space, and Tuki Taki as well, right? So again, heavy activity backed by solid adoption from enterprises. So we're seeing a lot of this mapping towards what enterprises need. And if we can also move quickly to the next piece, I'll spend a few seconds on this. These are some of the other segments we looked at. So within FCC, how do you do risk intelligence? You have players like your Napier, Acuminor, even someone like a Bureau, Signzy, Caron coming in. All of them are doing multiple things in specific regions with specific enterprises. We had unified fraud and AML systems, which is again, listeners today is a key theme for us. We are doing a Framil product speak matrix assessment that is due to come out in the next few months. And that is one of the big themes we are seeing in the market. And lastly, from a trade finance compliance, crypto blockchain compliance, we are seeing an interesting mix of providers as well. So, Ronak, again, the
Yeah.
activity is huge.
Yeah, no, again, I think this is fantastic. And I know this is just a bit of a small sliver of the overall landscape that we cover as part of our technology coverage. I know we're getting some questions and comments around access to the slides, access to
Yeah.
the material that we are presenting today. So what we are doing is we are flashing an offer. It's a complimentary offer to have a 30-minute discussion with our average group analyst. If you register on this link, we'll make sure we'll also send you the slides that we're using out here today. We'll also have the recording of this LinkedIn Live available later for folks out here, right? So please, click on the link in the chat. We'll make sure we send you the slides, and also happy to do a deep dive on these areas. So if you are a enterprise who's looking to make technology decisions and want to understand the landscape, or are you are investors in this space and want to understand the market better, or you are a technology provider and want to speak to our teams or participate in any of our research, this is a great opportunity. So click on the link, and we'll make sure that we give you access to the slides, but also access to our analyst team to have a further chat about. Okay, so Pradeep, sorry for that diversion, but I think we needed to make that announcement. So let's talk about the last thing that is there of the five segments. Right now, we spoke about a lot of private equity investments. this is one area which is also getting a lot of boost from the current administration in the US, right? So if you think about the recent executive order to allow alternative assets to be invested as part of the 401ks, kind of offers $1 trillion of investments that can flow into alternative assets, which is giving a massive boost to how private equity thinks about the market as a whole. And this is where we are really excited, right? Again, in terms of how the things are shaping up, right? So, a private equities are the ones who are also shaping up the fintech and the technology ecosystem by investing in them, driving the value. But at the same time, private equities also need a lot of technology to drive their own decisions, their fund life cycles, to everything around alternative assets that's happening out here. So, could be really interested in hearing your point of view, right? How is the private equity landscape, changing? What are the technology investments that they are doing? How should we think about this?
Sure, Ronak. And I know sometime back, listeners, we talked about how wealth got opened up with all the democratization of wealth, peace, mass affluence. I think with alternate assets, we are inching towards that. The recent executive order opening up investments to alt assets for 401k investors in the US geography is definitely a step in that direction. We have also been seeing these market signals at least these past 18 months as we see volatility in the market from a macro perspective and how things are shaping up. We are definitely seeing fund diversion and safer havens in the alt assets market as a whole, which is translating to higher AUM, and which is also then translating to the need to be equally supported by technology in this area. Funny thing is, a lot of the PE world and a lot of the alt assets world, even though it is full of a lot of the investments from a financial services perspective, even from a money perspective, if we look at it, but the technology investment in this sector, if we look at it, is just getting started. So for instance, if I take the example of a PE firm trying to digitize their entire, say they want to take better investment decisions, they want to manage the portfolio of the companies they have, many a times it is still an Excel based model. Just to take a very basic example, we are seeing again investments from third party technology platforms coming up in this space. Hey, how can we digitize this for you? How can I build these digital operating platforms? How can I do the fund life cycle for you better, right? And all of these things are again translating to the needs of how different alt asset classes behave, which is where we had recently published our perspective on how the broader alt assets market from a services, technology, and operations perspective is evolving. So do give it a read. We're looking at it from a process lens, we're looking at it from an ecosystem lens, and how the broader market forces will drive the demand for that. At the same time, as we look at it, we do have a point of view on how AI is going to bring an impact to private equity space and how the entire landscape is going to evolve from an ecosystem perspective. And I know, Ronak, you talked about how this entire ecosystem is shaping up, but anything additional you have to add to this piece?
Yeah, no, again, I think you covered it all, right? For me, I'm really excited about how the alt assets landscape shapes up, because this is one that can, I think it just increases the fundamental TAM of what we are going after. So the target addressable market expansion is what I'm looking at, and that gives impetus to drive innovation, more funding into this market, and obviously more innovation it will benefit the end customers out here. So I'm very excited about that. And then your other point, I just want to reemphasize, is on the AI infusion in the private equity, and I think that's the piece which I think is one of the fantastic blogs that your team has written in terms of the $200 billion plus opportunity of how that is shaping up. So that itself seems to be another massive TAM that is staring right in front of us, right? So a lot of activity. So really excited about how that is shaping up.
Yeah. And one other thing to add to that, given you said AI, we're also, I think my team is in the process of covering our perspective on how Allview system launch of this agentic AI platform for the alt
Yeah.
assets industries is shaping up. So again, pretty exciting thing happening in the space. We're speaking to a lot of the other providers in the market as well.
So who are these other providers, right? Beyond Allview, who are the alt assets and the private equity tech space?
Sure. So as we look at it, I think again, I know by now all the listeners today have heard us talk about process because we go very deep into process. Even in the alt asset space, we are looking at it from a process perspective. So as you look at the entire deal life cycle, right from your pre-investment to deal execution to portfolio management and finally exit and value realization. And I think, apologies, the infographic is slightly off. But then if you look at it, the top row, which is from your Allview, Anduin, Atom Invest, iCapital, and others, we are largely on the pre-investment side. We're seeing good activity on SSNC from both from portfolio management and exit and value realization also. So even FIS coming in catering to certain aspects of it. And if we can move to the next slide, I can also touch about specifically from an asset perspective. So if I look at the PE market, I think we have iCapital, we have eFront. We have also heard lately from Dynamo Software that is also making waves in this market. Again, by different asset classes, we have different providers specializing in it. So for instance, real estate, we see activity from someone like an Altus Group, even Yardi. Hedge funds, again, we are seeing sorry, activity from Enfusion, right? So this market, I would say, is just getting started, right? A lot of the large alt asset managers, these big fund houses, PE firms, are the first ones who have already started making the shift to digitizing their day-to-day operations. And we believe, our conviction is that the rest of the market, the mid-market firms, will also follow this shift. And the technology provider landscape is ready to cater to them by specific process, by different alt asset classes. So again, an interesting space to watch out for, and the market forces are only going to support the growth for this segment.
Yeah, and I expect a lot of new entrants coming out here as we go about it, right? So, Kriti, before we get into artificial intelligence and the implications of all of this into the tech segment, there was one question that I did want to take, right, from what we got from the chat out here, right? So this question was, what is going to separate the winners from the rest of the pack in the environment, right? Because this is largely around three must do's, right? What to avoid, so the firms are focused on real impact, right? Which is basically largely from a banking perspective. If you look at core banking vendors, and as we look at US versus rest of the globe, what is happening, right? So, Kriti, as you reflect on this, at least the first thought that comes into my head from a core banking perspective in the US is a lot of the banks, right? If you look at it, right, there are 3,000 plus regulated banks in the industry, in just the US market. A lot of them, right, have not done any form of core banking modernization for at least a decade or even more, right? And a lot of these banks have multiple core banking systems because of acquisitions and other pieces of different businesses coming together and driving that. So one of the things that the winners in this market need to do is create a pathway and I would say a ramp way from moving from these legacy systems or these older systems to more of the modern environments, right? We've seen many approaches being kind of touted, from hollowing the core towards, kind of progressive modernization and so on and so forth. And none of that has been fundamentally successful because a lot of these forget the core piece of data that is locked in the core systems. The data repatriation fees are pretty high. And also, what is happening is trying to do exactly the same thing that was coded in the old core banking system doesn't work. So I would say the winners are going to be one who are using their ecosystem partners, be it consulting, system integrators, and others, shaping the client thinking around what is the new architecture and design for these modern core banking systems. Still buy-in compliant and all of those things, absolutely agreed, and allows you to do that. But it's not a like to like as is of the what the old core was. Second, creating a ramp from a data ramp exit perspective, so that because there's huge data repatriation fees which we need to manage, that we need to kind of look at it. And the third, as they do all of this, they need to look at how quickly they can integrate with rest of the ecosystem that is out there. So building something which is an ecosystem ready core banking environment is going to be very critical as we are thinking about all of this. I think those are three things, at least from a US perspective, that I see, Kriti. But I wanted to take your view as well as you think about
Yeah.
this question.
Yeah, yeah. I think Ronak, you summarized it quite well. But the one thing that I want to call out here is, who will be the winners? I think the winners will be the one who are not afraid to say, hey, we don't know everything. So time and again, we have seen technology providers who are very complacent with their current offering, or trying to think with their existing client base, they have it all. I think the world is innovating quite fast. And Ronak, like you mentioned, data repatriation becomes a very real issue. AI. one big piece that the core banking world has been ignoring heavily, which is evident in our research as well, Ronak, the top 50 research for core banking providers. I don't think we heard about even mentions of Gen AI and let alone agentic AI, right? And which is where the ecosystem is evolving fast. Customers are not going to wait for that innovation to pick up, right? And that's where banks who are already struggling with selling commoditized products, they will lean on you as tech providers heavily. And you will need to open up the systems even more. How do you integrate? How do you expose these APIs? How can you have these agentic AI use case enablement? How can you have these future ready AI enabled models? I think that is what is going to set you apart.
Yeah. And the other thing that I do want to say is we talk about a lot of these modern software as a service providers who are coming into the ecosystem and they talk about AI. One of the things they are struggling with is getting the adoption in the enterprise context, right? So they are struggling to take their software as a service and their AI solutions into the enterprise environment. So the enterprise environment is their unique data set, their unique processes, and their unique ways of working. And we keep hearing about, hey, we need these forward deployed engineers who are not just engineers but consultants who can come in and help you figure these pieces out, which is work with the enterprise data, bring the capabilities from a process perspective and drive this change. And that is where I would say one of the successful trait for these software as a service providers is going to be the ability to not just have FDEs but have process FDEs. Build these for each of these processes. I think that Kriti's been talking about over the last 30-35 minutes, right? If I take each of these processes, we do need a forward deployed engineers which are aligned to the process and can work to kind of drive the implementation in the client environment, take the data, bring out the magic out of that data in their context and drive adoption. And I think that's what's going to show true value. It's going to be very hard to show true value from demos which are more pre-recorded videos or fictional kind of a bank being created on a front end, but back end is kind of completely missing. So we've seen the hollowness of these demos, which obviously the clients also are now seeing through it, and they are not going to invest a lot of money. So if you want to drive real adoption and if you want to be a winner in this market, you have to have a mindset around forward deployment and kind of driving this in the customer context versus doing innovation just in the labs, right? So the labs are moving into the core enterprise environment, and you're doing a lot more of this as co-innovation eventually, specifically with large enterprises to drive this. So that's where I think, and this Kardeep, was a great question, and again, thank you for asking this. But I want to get back to AI, right? Because it kind of brings us back to what we are seeing from a BFS segments perspective, right? So we covered 5 segments: core banking, lending, wealth management, private equity, financial crime and compliance. There is definitely a lot of AI, agentic AI activity that we are seeing. Primarily from my lens, there are 3 pathways of enterprise AI adoption that I'm seeing right now. The first one is supercharging the human or amplifying the human, right? Driving a lot more task-based productivity, automation to make workflow better. The second is about existing technology stack to be supercharged with AI, right? If I already have a CRM system or a core systems or a workflow system, how can I use AI that is being offered out of the box and use that to supercharge my technology stack? And the third that we, I think, briefly spoke about today is systems of execution, right? How do I take a combination of human and AI agents to not just drive automation, but also drive autonomous workflows? So this autonomizing of the workflows or agentifying the systems of record, systems of engagement, systems of insight is where systems of execution kind of truly stands out, right? And I know you are doing a lot of work around systems of execution and wealth management, lending, financial crime and compliance, retail banking, investment banking, and so on and so forth. So a lot of good work is going to be get published in the next few weeks. I'm very excited about getting to see them. But I wanted to hear your views, right? As you see AI across these 5 segments, what are you seeing and how are things evolving?
Yeah, and it's actually very different across these 5 segments, Ronak, because I believe AI has taken the shape of what stage of transformation or innovation each of these segments have been and taken on a completely different meaning. So if I look at core banking, it is all about, hey, how can AI help with an intelligent execution layer? So how can it help me do better servicing? How can it help me with better rules execution? How can I do orchestration across platforms? Within lending, this becomes more about decision intelligence because there are so many decisions to take within lending at each stage, the document processing, the underwriting, right? then ultimately you're handing out the loan, the servicing, collections piece, right? So how can AI help with that? Wealth, it becomes all about hyper personalization, right? But in a different sense. How can AI drive that? And if I look at private equity, alt assets, inundated with so much data, with no structured format to analyze it, AI then, for AI, the priority then becomes is how do I make sense of all this data? How can I make data work for me in this fast-paced segment? And finally, from a financial crime and compliance, it all becomes about how can AI help me be more proactive in terms of compliance execution. So each of the key challenges in the segment, that is what AI is targeting.
Oh, this is fantastic. And again, Kriti, thank you for covering all of this with us. We have a complimentary offer for all of you. So those who have want to understand about deeper dive into these areas or just want to access the slides, please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to share the summary with all of you. Um, and if you need some more questions and deep dives, happy to do that as well. And the last thing that we do before we let all of you go is we have two of our events upcoming. So in Dallas, right? One is Engage, where we have huge amount of financial services enterprises coming. I was just looking at the registrations. More than 30% of our registrations are financial services enterprises, but it's across the board. So folks who buy technology and services are going to be there at Engage, and they do want to understand how AI, systems of execution, and all of these trends that we talked about is shaping the industry. So definitely Engage is going to be important. The other one is Elevate. So if you are a technology provider who's looking to drive growth and want to use AI to kind of drive change, this is your environment. So we definitely want to make sure you are there at Elevate as well. Both are there in Dallas early September. So Engage is September 8 to 10. Elevate is September 10 to 12. So I'm hoping to see a lot of you for the whole week with us in Dallas, where we talk about everything around what's next in terms of AI, but also what's happening in the world of technology and technology services. So really excited about how this is shaping up. And Kriti, thank you for taking your time and covering this with us.
Yeah, thanks, Ronak. It has been an amazing conversation, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.